Should the Manhattan DA's office take this one lying down? Should they just accept what appears to be Judge Merchan's tentative ruling that he is not going to impose a jail sentence on Donald Trump? No, he's rather leaning, he's more inclined, he's about to rule that there's going to be an unconditional release of Donald Trump. Yes, the conviction of 34 felony counts stays on the books, but there won't be jail time. And what should the Manhattan DA's office do about it when it's their chance to appeal? I break it down here on MeidasTouch Network and Legal AF. I am Michael Popok. Let's take a look at what just happened. You know what happened. Let's talk about what happens next. We just got the decision by the judge denying Donald Trump's second attempt to dismiss the conviction, 34-count felonies in New York, finding that there was no president-elect immunity or supremacy clause immunity that would apply in this particular case. And he then moved on to sentencing. I got very excited. I said, oh, it's going to be January 10th, sort of what I predicted. Before the inauguration, we're going to have a ruling by the judge. That's when things went off kilter, went off the rails. Judge said, I don't normally prejudge things. I'm paraphrasing here, but I am going to, and I'm going to let the parties make their motions and their briefing. But I'm inclined to do an unconditional dismissal of the remainder of the sentencing, meaning Donald Trump will not serve any time in jail. He won't even get community service. And I object to that. I have said before, I'll say it again. At least a year and a half, if not 2 years, in some sort of incarceration is appropriate, given the 34 felony counts and the attempts to interfere with the election back in 2016. Manhattan DA is going to have a big decision to make. Are they just going to sit back and let this be the precedent that is set by Judge Merchan? Or are they going to also take their own appeal or cross-appeal, assuming Donald Trump appeals, to the First Department Appellate Division, which is the appellate court that sits in New York, that's where it starts. And then it then moves on to the Court of Appeals, the highest court in New York. And then I'm going to talk at the back end of this hot take about the role, if any, of the United States Supreme Court in all this. But I'm encouraging the Manhattan DA to do its job. It came this far. This has been jokingly referred to as the zombie case, but the zombie case led to a felony conviction 34 times by a 12-person, 12-0 jury in New York. And I don't think any of those jurors would be happy if we were to poll them now that their hard work of listening to weeks and weeks of testimony, dozens and dozens of witnesses, sorting through evidence, listening to the two other co-conspirators testify against Donald Trump, David Picard of the National Enquirer, Michael Cohen, his former consigliere, I think they'd be none too pleased to realize that for all of their hard work, just because Donald Trump had the fortune to get reelected or elected in November, it means he's not going to serve any jail time. That's a win for Donald Trump. Sure, the felony stays on the books at the present time, but he needs jail time. Now, I knew he wasn't going to serve jail time during the upcoming 4 years of his new administration. I wanted that to start on the day after he left office, returning back to the masses of the public, no longer the president, a former president of the United States at best. So Manhattan DA, look, I think you're going to have to try your best to argue for the appellate court what you argued to Judge Merchan unsuccessfully, Justice Merchan unsuccessfully. He rejected your request that you put a pin in the sentencing, mark down in the books a conviction, and then delay for another time, abate for another time under the Alabama rule in New York until he comes out of being the president and sentence him then. He rejected that. I think you need to go back to that. Sentencing him now, but having the sentence be incarceration starting after he gets out of office is also a viable solution to the temporary immunity issue, if you will, that he enjoys now. Although I think Justice Merchan did a good job in debunking the theory that there's any immunity enjoyed right now by Donald Trump, nor that sentencing happening after he left office would somehow impede the presidential constitutional duties. And so I think that's what you need to do. And just Give him a sentence now. Let him challenge the sentence. Sure, he's got appellate rights. Trump does. Everybody does in our system of justice. Let him take his appeal on the convictions, on the judge's errors to the extent they can make out any, on the motions to dismiss that have been denied against him, and on the sentencing. Take that whole ball of wax to the appellate department, the appellate division, first department in Manhattan, and argue there before a 5-judge panel. And if you lose that, then take it up to the Court of Appeals. In the meantime, the Manhattan DA, just to do a little tutorial on appeals, should do their own appeal, a cross appeal, about this last issue where I think the judges fumbled on the 1-yard line about sentencing. They should fight for a sentence to be imposed now of incarceration to be served after Donald Trump comes out of office of at least 1.5 years or 2 years. If not for Donald Trump, for the future Donald Trumps. This can't be the result. It is the result, but it can't be the result. And the Manhattan DA just can't put their tail between their legs and bury their head in the sand and say, well, we've done a yeoman's job. We got the first and only conviction. Pat ourselves on the back. Forget it. Forget it. That's not what the American people and our public justice system demands. Continue with the appeal. Now, let me flip it over. Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court's role in all this. Everything I've just talked about for the last 6 minutes is all about state court proceedings. We, of course, have a dual court system, a justice system, one state and one federal. Civil and criminal, too. On the federal side, Donald Trump's got some legitimate arguments that he needs to have heard by the United States Supreme Court about immunity. Particularly, there's an immunity motion to dismiss that the judge denied, finding that no aspect of the evidence used about Donald Trump's official presidential role after he was elected in 2016 backs up onto the conspiracy, and therefore it is not official conduct evidence, which is improper under the Supreme Court's Trump versus U.S. immunity decision from the summer. And even if it was admitted, and even if it was official conduct that should not have gone to the jury, it's not reversible error. He's right on that. But Trump should have an appeal to the United States Supreme Court on this immunity issue. Now, whether they take it or not, that's a different story. First stop on a train for an emergency application is going to be Sotomayor, because she's the senior justice that sits over all things New York. She can make the decision and reject the application on the emergency appeal, or refer it over to the full bench, all 9 people. And so somewhere in 2025, if they decide to get involved with immunity, they're going to suck the case up into the United States Supreme Court. There's a good chance they're not going to do that. I'm not sure they want to keep touching this third rail, seeing what happened with the immunity decision and what it unleashed in America. And they don't need to revisit it on this small issue about whether tiny pieces of discrete evidence against Donald Trump, against mountains of evidence against him, inculpatory evidence mattered. They can stay away from it and just say pass and not take the appeal. Now, when it comes to immunity in Trump, they've passed recently. He didn't like the fact that he wasn't able to use the immunity doctrine, Trump, against E. Jean Carroll in the sexual assault, defamation, punitive damage case. Supreme Court doesn't care and has not accepted the appeal, even though Trump's asked for it, when the Second Circuit Court of Appeals rejected Donald Trump's efforts to assert the immunity defense to avoid liability for sexual assault and defamation on E. Jean Carroll. So it's not that clear. Let's stay in the United States Supreme Court for a minute. He'd have to make an application. They'd have to either take it on what's called a writ of certiorari or some sort of other emergency application. And then maybe in 2025, we'd have another ruling. And that's where the Manhattan DA, I think their issues about sentencing stay in state court. Stay in the state court side. I don't see a constitutional issue about sentencing. Maybe about the conviction and the application of immunity. That's on the Fed side. But on the sentencing side, I think that stays within the province of the state courts. Lastly, let me end the hot take on this issue, which hasn't been, I don't think, discussed at all, which is who's going to be representing Donald Trump in all of these matters going forward. Donald Trump has taken all of his criminal defense lawyers and appellate lawyers, and he's nominated them for key jobs in the Department of Justice and the Solicitor General's office. The Solicitor General being the lawyer that represents the United States of America and the administration's positions before the United States Supreme Court. often referred to as the 10th Justice. His three main successful, so to speak, criminal lawyers are Todd Blanche, Emile Beauvais, and John Sauer. Todd Blanche has been nominated to be the number 2 lawyer in the Department of Justice. He would often be the acting attorney general with Pam Bondi, who's been nominated to be the attorney general. His right-hand person is his right-hand person in the case, Emile Beauvais, his partner. And Emile Beauvais would be the number 3 or number 4, depending upon how you count it, in the Department of Justice. John Sauer, who is the lawyer that argued both the 14th Amendment Colorado case for Donald Trump and the immunity case for Donald Trump, and also is on the briefing here and would be on the briefing normally on all of his appellate matters, sort of Donald Trump's chief criminal appellate lawyer. He's going to be the Solicitor General. Now, all these things might happen, not happen until February. So until they've been actually put in their chairs in the federal side, they can continue to represent Donald Trump. But if this thing stretches out beyond February, Donald Trump's going to have to get a whole new set of lawyers to represent him personally and privately in these matters. It's not going to be Alina Habba, I assure you, or any of the other, indicted lawyers for Donald Trump or those that have lost their bar license. So he's going to have to go into the well. Now, I'm sure there's people now that he's the president again and major law firms who are willing to step forward and represent Donald Trump, maybe in a way that they weren't willing to do, when he was campaigning or 4 years ago. We'll have to see. We'll have to keep a close eye on which lawyers step forward to replace Blanche, Emile Beauvais, and John Sauer. And I'll follow it right here on the MeidasTouch Network. And of course, on Legal AF, come on over to Legal AF. That's a channel I curate, collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network. And we sit at the intersection of law and politics. We put up 5 or 6 videos a day at that intersection. Amazing people over there. Court Accountability Actions with me, Dina Dahl, occasionally Karen Friedman, Ignifilo, Shan Wu, and the rest. And I'm doing a lot of the work there. And of course, I'm sort of the editor-in-chief of Legal AF. We're at 385,000 subscribers in 3 months. We're going to hit 500,000 in the first quarter and in the 2025. And that intersection of law and politics is going to be a super hot corner coming into the Trump administration. And we'll be there for it. And we hope you will too. So I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.